Okay. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining the webinar. My name is Robert Little. Tonight we have, this is too official. Tonight we have two alumni, Kyle Ferrier and Jenna Gibson. They're joining us from DC. It's early in the morning there, and it's late in the evening here. My name is Robert. I'm a graduate of Pitzer College, double major in environmental policy and sociology. Here in Korea, I teach at Changwon Science High School, which is in Gyeongsang, Namdo. It's a co-ed science school, boarding school. And I guess the last thing that we should say is probably why we joined this webinar, or like why you were interested. For me, I lived in DC for a summer. I'd love to move back. And it's really a cool opportunity to talk to people who have applied their Fulbright experience to their job afterwards. Okay, let's go Abik, and then Alana, and then Sam, and then Alicia.
Okay. All right, so I'll go first. Hi, my name is Abik. If you read my bio beforehand, it's pretty straightforward. I'm originally from Maryland, outside of the DC area, so I'm very familiar with the sort of DC culture. And I have lots of family friends and friends who currently live in Washington, D.C. I went to school in California. I went to Berkeley, majored in political economy. I live in Daejeon, and I teach at Jungman Middle School. And I'm going to be returning to D.C. in August, and it's likely I'll probably be working in the international development space as opposed to East Asia policy. But still, East Asia is something that I really like, and this time in Fulbright is supposed to help frame my decision about where I want to go for graduate school in comparison with my work in international development.
Cool.
Killer. Oh,
Hi, my name is Alana Woolley. I am from Texas, have lived in Texas my whole life, and went to school in Texas. So I am interested in DC because, I could do with something different. I graduated from Texas Christian University with writing and anthropology degrees, and I joined this webinar. I'm very interested in communication. I think, Jenna, you work in communication outreach for KEI. So I'm very interested in how you, in issue-based communication or communication with a bigger purpose. I'm facing a job in corporate communications, which is a bit more soulless. So I'd just like to hear more about that.
All right, I'll start. Hi, my name's Sam Moser. I'm a second year. I teach in Seoul right now. You might have heard of it. I'm from North Carolina, outside of Raleigh. I went to school in North Carolina. I studied international studies and double majored in Spanish. And I'm curious about what it's like to live in DC and what you guys' opinion is on it.
Okay. Hi, my name's Alicia, and I grew up in Wisconsin. I went to school in Minnesota. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, I
You're good,
peeped
you're
on
good.
your LinkedIn, so I saw some Minnesota representing there. I did spend some time in DC at the Peace Corps and Department of Health, and I guess I'm really trying to reorient myself towards a Korea direction. I've worked a lot on my language skill this year, and I can't imagine leaving Korea experience behind. So I want to see what there is to do in terms of Korea and foreign policy and that kind of thing. So yeah, thanks for joining us. I really appreciate it, you guys.
Yeah, so sounds good. I think a lot of you guys are really interested in the DC aspect, so we can definitely touch on that. Do you want to introduce yourself first, or?
Sure.
Okay.
So I'm Kyle Ferrier. I work here with Jenna at the Korea Economic Institute of America in DC. So when I was in Korea, I lived in Naju. I taught at an all-boys middle school, Youngsang Junghakyu, but I don't know if that's still a school anymore. That is in the Fulbright community. I lived there for a year, and I stayed after for about 4 or 5 months, and I did an internship with the Korean government, and then I also took a language class. And then when I came back, I worked for a bank in New York City for a while, realized I didn't like it, and then went to London for a year to do my graduate degree in international political economy, and then was very fortunate enough that the timing worked out where there was a job opening here, and I've been here since September of last year.
So for me, I've been at KEI since July of last year, so it was kind of good timing there. And when I was in Korea, I was in Cheonan for 2 years, teaching at a co-ed middle school. Had an amazing time, had no idea I was going to stay in Korea for 2 years and fall in love with it, and then came back and did my master's degree at Georgetown. And it was kind of a general IR degree, but within it, I ended up focusing on Asia quite a bit. And then when I graduated, I got this job here at KEI through another Fulbright ETA alum friend. And so I think that's one of the things that I will definitely talk about or encourage you guys to keep in mind is that your Fulbright network and the other ETAs will be really, really helpful, especially when you come back and especially in DC where the connection is very, very important. As far as KEI, so you guys may or may not have looked at the website or anything like that, but basically we're a think tank. And what that means is we're nonpartisan. We are not a lobbying group. We basically, the goal is to foster friendship and understanding between the United States and South Korea. And we do that through some academic publications, through online outreach, and through programs both here in DC and around the country. So for example, this year Kyle has gone to Florida State University, and he's been to Louisiana last week, and we went up to New Jersey, all these different places, and we go to universities and like local, the local business community, things like that, places where people might be interested in Korea but might not know that much about it. And so we're trying to get the word out there that Korea is important, is basically the gist. Anything else you want to say about KEI?
No, you want to talk about what you do here?
Yeah, so for me, I'm the director of communications, and basically the way that I like to explain it is all the stuff that we do here at KEI, we have a fairly small staff, but we create a lot of content. So we have a blog that we update several times a week. I run a podcast every week. We have the academic publications. We have all these programs going on. And so my job is basically to make sure people know about it. So we have the active social media, the website, as well as connections with the traditional media community, reporters and journalists here in DC, both Korean journalists and like the US media. And so my job is to basically talk to them and make sure that they know what we're doing so that we can get the word out about these cool programs that we're running.
And I'm the Director of Academic Affairs and Research. So essentially my job is to facilitate cooperation or understanding between the academic and the policy communities. We do that by doing what Jenna had mentioned, running some of these programs here in Washington. So this Thursday, so tomorrow, we'll have a program on sanctions on North Korea and whether or not they're the right tool against North Korea. And then next Tuesday, we'll also have a program on South Korea's strategic approach towards the Middle East. And both of those are my programs, and we bring these scholars from around the United States and across the world to come to Washington, D.C. to present on issues of importance to Korea right now. And we'll also bring policymakers from D.C. across the United States to meet with policymakers and policy experts to meet with local communities and local universities to engage with them and to further the public discourse in those areas on topics, anything related to Korea, ranging from the nuclear issue to economics to the National Assembly elections that took place. I was out at UC San Diego for a program on that in April.
Yeah, lots of different stuff.
Yeah.
So I guess we can get to your questions because that's probably more interesting. But as far as like besides KEI like background stuff, we're happy to answer questions about both living in DC, finding work in DC, and grad school, because we'll both have very different perspectives having come from different grad schools, but I think there'll be a lot of overlap as well, so that will be kind of interesting.
Awesome. Okay. I'll go ahead and ask, does anybody have a burning question based on the bios? If not, go ahead.
So I have questions about bios related to both of your experiences in getting your master's. That's something that really interests me because I talked about like in the future getting my degree. So I know that you went to LSE and Georgetown respectively, and so I want to talk about the merits of going to both programs. And to clarify, at Georgetown, were you at the School of Foreign Service?
Yeah, so at Georgetown, I was at School of Foreign Service. The degree would be Master of Science in Foreign Service. That was the program that I did. But within the School of Foreign Service, you can get a degree in Asian Studies or Security Studies or Global Human Development, all those different ones. But my particular one was MSFS.
Okay. And so I guess the perspective I wanted to talk about first, Kyle, with regards to LSE, like a master's program in England is something that's like always interests me, especially in terms of like political economy and that sort of space, and like because I think it's very different from international security, where I think you probably need to be in the U.S. if you want to do like the best things related to the military and American foreign policy. But what specifically do you think you gain from getting a degree in like at LSE that maybe that perspective you wouldn't be able to get in the U.S.?
Well, I could probably speak to the specific program, which I'm assuming you would apply to as well, the International Political Economy program, which I graduated from. And it's very, very different from the U.S., whereas the U.S. you'll have, in terms of the structure, I'm sure Jenna had a lot of essays and finals and oral exams. And LSE, the vast majority of your grades come down to 3-hour tests, 3-hour written tests at the end of your year. So you don't really have anything to. You have a lot of studying and revising to do throughout the year, but there's no tests really or papers along the way. There are papers, but they're ungraded that they don't count towards your final exam or your final grade. And LSE, comparatively to the U.S. schools, is a lot more theoretical, and I think the UK in general, their programs there are a lot more theoretical than they are here in the U.S. But they also present very different perspectives that you would get, and just different as opposed to just based on practical versus theoretical. In the U.S., at least for political economy, there's the British school and the U.S. school, and the British school is a more holistic, constructivist, liberal, theoretical approach, whereas the U.S. School seems to be more focused on quantitative and using math as a method. Whereas the UK is a bit more different, and they've used math, but it's part of a larger structure, whereas the US is solely focused on that in terms of political economy. So there's a lot of benefits to studying in the UK, but it really depends on what you would like to do. And I think one of the biggest benefits, actually, is that it's only a year long. It's going to be a tough year, but you'll save money and time, and you'll still have a master's degree.
So that's something that really interests me, the one-year aspect of it, and also saving money too. That would be nice. But my follow-up question is, what do you think of the perception of one-year masters like English programs as opposed to like the 2-year Georgetown MSFS? Because like people know guaranteed like what you've gone through, and you have all these tests, and there's like a little more graded, and it seems more rigorous. So like, is there? I don't know how long you've been exposed to this, but is there perhaps a negative bias towards like shorter British degrees as opposed to like a longer American master's?
I haven't heard of that. That's a good question. I haven't heard of that. I thought there might be, but I think if you go to a big enough name-recognized school here in the U.S., so if you go to Oxford, Cambridge, Edinburgh, LSE, I think that's not really an issue. Maybe for a smaller or lesser well-known school here in the U.S., that might be an issue. But from what I've been able to tell so far, it hasn't been a problem with anything I've encountered.
All right, awesome.
Awesome. Taylor just joined us. Welcome, Taylor.
Thank you.
I'm getting a few quick things. Sorry that. I'm going to go ahead and ask one of Brianna's questions because she's not here. So this one's for Jenna. So Jenna, you previously worked in journalism and did your undergraduate studies in that field. So what made you change directions in your career, and how does your writing life look now? It seems like from the bio that you gave us, you also just like juggle a whole bunch of diverse falls that are very interesting.
Yeah. So I hesitate to give this answer because I always feel like it's like not what people want to hear. But basically, when I was in high school, I decided I want to be a journalist, and I'm kind of stubborn, and so that's what I decided I wanted to do. So that's what I was going to do. And so when I went to school, I did my degree in journalism. I worked for the student newspaper all 4 years, like 60, 70, 80 hours a week. It was like way too much. Kind of burned myself out a little bit, but because I was so focused on that, I never really studied abroad. I like basically just tunnel vision did journalism, didn't really get to do some of the things that in hindsight I wanted to get out of my college experience. And so that's partially why I applied to Fulbright, was I wanted to go abroad and do something completely unrelated because I hadn't really done anything else. So then when I went to Korea and loved it so much, and by the end of this first year, I was like, there's no way I'm done here yet, and ended up staying the second year. I would talk to some of my friends who got jobs in more traditional like news outlets, or I have a really good friend who works on a radio show and things like that, and I'd be talking to them about their daily life that I used to do. Like I used to be in that space, and I just could not imagine myself going back to that, I guess. And so that was kind of how I knew that I should try to do something else, was when I was talking to them and I was like, no, I can't do that anymore. And it wasn't necessarily the theoretical, like the writing and the communications. I still am very interested in communications. I'm still very interested in how people understand things about issues and topics and things like that. But it was more like the fact that when you're in a traditional news media outlet or you know, an online outlet, you're assigned a story about XYZ, you write that day, the next day you're writing about ABCD, you know, so there's no consistency, I guess, of the topics that you're writing about. And it's kind of cool because you get a variety of things that you learn about. But I wanted something with a little bit more longevity, I guess. And so that's one thing that, and one of you kind of mentioned this, you know, like talking of communications with a purpose, right? And so that's what really attracted me to something like KEI, would be there's always this thread of Korea, and I might be talking about 10 different things during the week and, you know, working on all these different programs, but there's at least that kind of common thread and kind of common goal that we're all working towards, which is helping people understand about Korea and some of these issues. So that's what I really like about being here at KEI, is there's still the variety, but you can come back to a common core, which I really enjoy.
Okay, can I follow up, since my question is for Jenna about communications? So because you don't have somebody assigning, this is what we're going to talk about, this is your, like, this is the goal, you have to communicate this, you know, in so many words, so many letters. How does KEI decide what its message is going to be at any particular time, what it's trying to communicate, and who's the target audience that you're aiming for? The podcast and the blog sound really interesting. I'm trying to imagine who you are hoping is listening.
That's a really good question. I think it's something that we really struggle with because we have such a wide variety of programs and there's so few of us. So the staff is only 9 people here, and we run 10 programs. So basically there's more programs than we have people. And so when it comes to who's the audience, it depends on which program you're talking about. So for example, every year in January we have Korean American Day, which is like the official designated U.S. holiday of Korean American Day, and so we honor Korean Americans who have done great things in their field. So last year was food. We honored a bunch of Korean American chefs. The year before was athletes. So we had a bunch of Korean American athletes come in, and so that was really cool. And that, in that case, the outreach is more to the Korean American community, you know, talking about some of the really cool things that Korean Americans have achieved. Okay, so there's that program. We have university programs that Kyle runs. So he'll go to, we went to FSU, went to Stanford, we're going to go to Green Bay, Wisconsin, for one of you is from Wisconsin, in the fall. And so in that case, it's students who are maybe interested in political science, maybe interested in Asia, but haven't had a chance to study Korea specifically because maybe their school doesn't have a Korea-specific major. And so that's the audience. Do you see what I mean? We have all these different programs, so it's hard to keep things straight. But basically, you have to think about your audience every single time you're doing something. So when we're doing an APS program, for example,
academic paper series.
Sorry, academic paper series program. So tomorrow we're going to be talking about sanctions, right? So who's the audience who would be interested in sanctions? And we try to target some people. We send emails, personalized emails to people that we know would be interested in it, who we've met before. And we have people coming from the Treasury Department. We have people coming from state. A lot of people from state who are interested in this topic. And so we kind of try to target based on what we're talking about. You know what I mean? So it's kind of a cop-out answer because there's lots of different audiences, but it is a really important thing to keep in mind. But in general, I would say my holistic goal of communicating our work at KEI is to talk to people who have just that slight hook of interest in either Asia or Korea but don't know very much about it. Because I think it's really hard to convince someone who has no idea where Korea is that Korea is important. So there's a large group of people that it would be great to talk to them, but we don't really have the resources to do that much outreach to that group. But people who know a little bit or want to know more or have heard something about Korea, and then we can kind of hook them. I think that's the kind of ideal group for us.
Okay. How do you measure success?
Oh man, that's a tough question. So I think the way that I'm measuring success, especially since I'm relatively new here at KEI, almost a year now, is it's really hard for us to compare to other groups and what they're doing because there's so many different factors. So I basically try to compare to ourselves. So when we're doing our quarterly reports that we send to our board of directors, I look at what 2015 quarter one looks like as far as the Twitter followers and Twitter engagement and Facebook engagement and things like that. Did I get more comments and likes than we did last year? And that's like the goal, I guess, for me. When it comes to programs, like, are we consistently getting enough people physically coming and watching it on the live stream? Trying something new, like trying to word the mailing, what's it called, subject line. Like, if you word the subject line differently, did we get more people clicking on the email? Like, I'm trying to experiment with stuff like that and then comparing it to, like, apples to apples, basically. So it's hard to come up with something that's success as, like, a very broad whole because our goal is so nebulous and very hard to measure as far as, like, did we increase friendship between the U.S. and Korea? There's no way of really measuring that, especially in the short term. Mm-hmm. So what I really try to do is find, like, small goals for our programs. Like, did we get more bodies in the room? Did we get more people on the live stream? Did I get, like, more retweets this, quarter versus last quarter or something like that? So I think it's really important to, set, like, specific goals, but not too broad, because otherwise you'll never be able to nail it down.
Okay, thank you. Very informative. Good.
I got one if nobody else is going. So it sounds like, Kyle, it sounds like what you do is very much what, like, an admission counselor does almost, like going around from different school to school, like spreading info about Korea. I'm wondering, but at the same time, right, you do these academic paper series are very, like, in-depth, very intellectual, very cerebral. Can you talk a little bit about, like, I don't know, I guess, like, your touring series, and then the audience that you poll, the conversations and the breadth and the depth that you have on your tour?
Well, you'd be surprised by the amount of interest that people have and the amount of knowledge that people are, especially on issues related to North Korea. People have done a lot of reading and research, and I went to Tallahassee, Florida, for Jenna had mentioned at Florida State, and I wasn't expecting that many people to show up because we had a public program, and on a humanitarian first approach versus security first approach towards North Korea, and is a security first approach towards North Korea an outdated outdated policy model, and I was expecting like 30, 40 people to show up, and 115 people were there. And normally when I moderate conversations, I'll have to ask one or two questions to get the audience going, but I was like fighting people to, they were fighting each other to ask questions, and it was really great, and all of them were really intelligent, and each one was better than the next, and so the level of knowledge on a lot of these issues is really great in a lot of areas, and I've been to, as Jen's mentioned, a few of them, a couple more. I've been BYU out in Provo, Utah. Our vice president was out at West Point to run a six-party talk simulation, so that's something that we also do as part of our university programs. It's one of our other core pillars. We had a few students here yesterday from University of Southern California here to participate in that, and that's something that we can do here. We bring that across the U.S. So we did that in northern New Jersey as well, at Montclair State University. Jen and I were there. That was one of our first programs together. One of my first programs, and I'm from Long Island, so I thought I could get to travel the world, travel across the U.S., and I go to northern New Jersey. But it was a great experience, and yeah, it's really great to interact with people who people tend just to think that the policy community and people who matter are here, and the public opinion that matters is here in D.C., where it's really U.S. is a whole huge diverse area, and people are really interested in it. And when we get involved with the local community, and sometimes when we can get involved, the local congressman or senator involved, it really helps out to bring attention to the issues and draws in crowds, and then it helps these policymakers understand what's important. So we had in North Georgia a couple of years ago, we had a program with a congressman there. We're going to Portland and Oregon. We'll probably have at least one congressman at each of those places, and then at University of Wisconsin Green Bay, we'll have the local congressman there. So a lot of these ways, Jenna had mentioned that our audience is very wide, and we do a lot of different things for an office of 9 people. And I think if there's ways for us to cross-pollinate what we can do, it helps, not only helps us, but it helps the local communities that we're engaged with to better understand the issues and to better learn about them and sort of cross-promote them at the same time.
Yeah, I think I was surprised at how much, because I had an almost cynical view of how much people knew about Korea, having lived there and come back and getting the question like, oh, north or south, like, that's still happens. Get used to it. So having got that question a lot and like just kind of not having a lot of friends who knew anything about Korea, I think I was a little more cynical. But then going to some of these universities, like, people might not know a ton as far as depth, or they haven't studied it really extensively, but they know like North Korea. They're interested in it. They're interested in maybe China, and then through China they're interested in how they're interacting with Korea, or through Japan, or things like that. So it's been actually really cool and enlightening to like go to these universities and see students who want to know more. It's always a really good feeling, I think.
Okay, I'd like to ask a question kind of about content. Specifically, online, I see a lot of talk about North Korea, or jokes about North Korea, and especially this year there's been a lot of launches and nuclear tests. So they're making some progress, but you look at the comment section, I mean, anywhere like NPR or on Reddit or New York Times, there's always just some, like, really, really disbelief and jokes, and this is all just a pile of junk. And if you had to respond to that, how would you phrase your response?
That's a tough question. So I actually have struggled with this as well, especially, were we still in Korea? When the interview came out, I think we were just back in the U.S. When that came out. And so that was like the big one where it was like obviously meant to be a joke and it was kind of satire, but not really like intelligent satire. But anyway, and so it's really hard because on one hand, I and some of the people that I've interviewed, so for example, I interviewed for the podcast Michael Kirby, who is the head of the Commission of Inquiry for Human Rights from the UN, looking into all, like that really long report, very detailed, all this crazy, horrible things that they're doing. And I kind of asked him that question, and he got really upset. He was like, "This is not a joke. Like, people are dying." So that is definitely a perspective that I see and that I totally agree with. But at the same time, people can't really wrap their mind around it. And by people, I mostly mean like Americans, kind of Western perspective. But it's not something that they can grasp, I guess, because it's so bad and it's so, like it's so removed from their experience and from anything that they understand, and so it's almost easier to make jokes about it as almost a way to like be interested in North Korea, if that makes sense. So on one hand, I think it's not a joke, and it does kind of upset me sometimes, and there's definitely things that cross the line. But on the other hand, if it gets people interested in talking about North Korea, it might not be so bad, I guess. So the interview, for example, was stupid and kind of offensive, but a lot of people are interested in North Korea because of the controversy with it. So is that like so bad, I guess? I don't know. I think about this a lot too. Like it's hard.
I don't think about it as often because I'm a director of communications. But this is it's a good question, and it's a tough question to answer, and I just don't know if there is the jokes about it are, I think, are fairly on poor taste, and there's something that you just do it on the comment section because it's easier, and it's easier to make fun of North Korea than it is to be constructive about it because we don't know that much about it in the first place. So the more we can do to shed more light onto what's going on in North Korea from a more objective perspective, I think the more we can do to dispel it. And I think that's really our only tool. And obviously we're not going to do it overnight, and a lot of it has to do with what's going on in North Korea, and there's only so much we can do. There's anything we can do with North Korea. But I think that as a think tank, I think we serve a really important purpose to, as Jenna had mentioned, Michael Kirby had talked about how serious these issues are, and for us as a think tank to continue to show how serious these issues are, and to continue to show how we should think about there's different ways to frame thinking about North Korea, and none of which include Kim Jong-un as a comedian, because it's just.
Can I say also, it actually, okay, so the jokes actually bother me from like people in comment sections and like comedians and like things like that. That bothers me less than serious news outlets reporting like quirky things that North Korea is doing. So for example, every couple weeks you'll get a story about like, oh, Kim Jong-un ordered the haircuts to be like this, that, and the other thing only, or whatever. Like, everyone whose name is Kim Jong-un has to change their name. Like, first of all, a lot of these things are completely uncorroborated. We don't actually know if that's the case at all, and in some of the cases they've been completely disproved. But because it was actually on like BBC and it was on VOA and it was on like CNN, it gets a lot more credibility. Like, if we're looking in the comment section, like, no one actually believes that some of these things are actually the case, or they know it's a joke, they know it's just people commenting. But like when these kind of silly rumors come out and it's in actual news stories, then people are able to be like, oh, North Korea, how quirky and ridiculous. That actually bothers me more, when reporters like don't take the time to like talk to people who actually know what's going on as much as we can know what's going on. So, yeah.
I have a question. Is there to Americans, or is there any sort of outreach to Koreans about Americans?
Sorry, can you say that one more time?
Tim, there's a bunch of feedback on your end.
Okay, I'll try turning my volume down. Okay. Is your outreach strictly to Americans, or is there any sort of outreach that you do to Koreans about Americans?
So basically, our goal is mostly for Americans. So since we're based here in DC, talking about Korea, I think the main goal is to help Americans understand about Korea because Koreans have a lot of other opportunities to either learn about America or learn about some of these issues, I think, but Americans don't have as much opportunity to learn about Korea specifically. So that's partially our goal, but we do some things that obviously we have a lot of scholars from Korea who come over to do the presentations and to do the outreach that we're running, and we also have some Korean students who are doing like work study programs here in DC or internships here in DC, and we'll run like the six-party talk simulation for them, and we'll do some like career talks and stuff like that for them as well. So I'd say it's like 90% Americans, 10% Koreans,
Yeah.
approximately. Yeah.
I have a question, a sort of different track. So originally we talked about like the experience of living in Washington D.C. And I think we're all kind of curious about that. You two are very plugged into like the Korean think tank in D.C., but there's obviously a lot more alumni of Fulbright Korea in Washington D.C. And so I wanted to hear you talk a little bit about what that network looked like, how involved you were with that network. And so both of you are involved in Korea right now, and maybe in the future, maybe you might go over to a different career. Do you think Fulbright Korea and that sort of network of alumni and your friends provides a good like resource for you to reach out to? And how do you like keep in contact with them? Do you go to like meet out at bars, like et cetera, et cetera?
So let's take this weekend, for example. How many Fulbright Korea alums did we see?
So many.
Like 20? There's a lot. So one of our really good friends from 2011 is doing CLS right now. I think one of you said you did CLS. So she was in DC for the like 2-day orientation type thing before going to Korea, and so we all met for dinner while she was here. And then another friend was here for a conference, so we met them on Saturday.
Another friend was there.
And then another friend who we ran into who was also here for a conference, and someone like ran into him at the mall and was like, "Oh, you're here, come to dinner." And then yeah, like it's more than you would expect here in DC.
Yeah. And not just people visiting. There's
12?
Yeah, there's at least 12 people from our year.
From 2011 alone.
Yeah. So we have a really good tight-knit group here, and I meet all these people from different years all the time, and it's just as easy to get along with them as it is to get along with people from my year, I think, because of the shared experience. And I think it's one of the best, if not the best, networking group there is, at least that I have. I know. What do they call you guys on Georgetown?
So at Georgetown there were like 10 of us, and they called us a cult, the Fulbright Korea cult. So. Which is I'm kind of proud of it actually, because we're like very close, and it actually I mean Kyle and I both attribute getting this job to a Fulbright Korea alum that we knew, and we're getting lunch with another 2011 alum who works at the World Bank later today, so like it's very much a part of our network here in DC, and it actually does bring results. Like we got these jobs because of this one person. So I would say that it can be the biggest asset that you have, but if you don't like continue to hang out with people, and you know, it doesn't necessarily automatically bring that, but it can really be really helpful.
Yeah, I thought I was just making friends. I didn't know I was making career contacts.
Well, I mean, it's the same thing basically. But I would say in DC it's very important. It's like more important than most places to at least know someone. And so if we can go back, no offense to Kyle and his English degree, but I think that's one of the reasons that I only applied to schools in DC, is because I knew I wanted to live here afterwards. I knew that this is where I wanted to land, and so I wanted the network to be based here, I guess. So now I have all these Fulbright Korea alums, but I also have 80 Georgetown, alums and friends that I went to school with, and I also have the people I did internships with and things like that. And so I think if if you know kind of location-wise where you want to end up, I think it's really important to actually go there and spend time, do internships, meet people who can vouch for you later on. I think that's key.
That's a fair point. I went to undergrad out in George Mason in Northern Virginia, so it was only about like a half-hour drive from DC. So I wanted to move somewhere else. But yeah, there's a good network here for you, at least for people who are still here, if you want to wind up in DC. So the UK system is great, and I probably wouldn't change anything. But you do have that if you come to grad school in DC, you do get all the benefits that Jenna did mention.
One last thing as far as switching careers or not necessarily doing the Korea thing, does Fulbright Korea make a difference? I would say Fulbright Korea doesn't necessarily, but Fulbright does. Literally, that name will open doors for you. Before I interviewed for this job, I interviewed for a couple other jobs that were a little bit less Korea focused, and that was something that was brought up in almost every interview. They like notice that on your resume. So I would say it's very, very helpful.
For sure. So I actually have a follow-up question about living in Washington, D.C. It's kind of rare to hear people who want to stay in Washington, D.C. because D.C. is a very transient city, and people sort of like do it for a little bit, then move on. What makes you want to stay in D.C.? Or like, why do you see yourself as being in DC for a long term?
For me, it's because all the jobs I want are here. It has, everything I want to do. So it's really it's very strange to me because I've been a very transient person for the past 5 years. I was here and graduated from Northern Virginia in 2011. Then went to Korea for a year and a half. Then was in New York City for a year and a half. Then was in London for a year. And now I'm here, and it's strange to me to think that, oh wait, like I can actually like put down roots here for at least like 5-6 years, and then think about things afterwards. So I'll probably wind up staying here for a while because I just don't know what I would do in any other city. There's just everything you'd want to do is at least everything I want to do related to policy and economics and business in Korea is here. It's either here or in Korea, and it's just easier to get a job here than it is in Korea, as I'm sure you guys know. So for me, it has everything to do with my career.
I would say that too, and then in addition, we talk about this all the time. I give him crap because he's from Long Island, but I'm not a New York person. I do not like it. I do not want to live there, and that is literally the only other place that would have the jobs that I want. And part of the reason that I really love DC is that it's a city. It's definitely a big city. You can find lots of stuff to do. You have lots of friends here. You know, there's always stuff going on, but it doesn't feel like a city in the physical sense. Like you're walking down the street and there's trees and greenery and sky and things like that that I don't feel like you get in some of the bigger cities. And so just from like a personal perspective, I actually really love DC that way. You can like walk around and like just, I mean, I walked home last night.
Walked to work this morning.
And he walked to work this morning, and you know, like, so it's actually quite nice as far as like a livable city, and I think people underestimate it because the people who come to DC for like a short amount of time are kind of looking for, you know, let's get this experience, let's get some hill experience, and then I can go get another job or something like that. But if you actually do stay in DC, it's quite a nice place to live.
I think one.
No, you don't like it.
No, keep
Somebody else go.
Hi. So on that note, I actually went to school in DC, and I really want to get settled down in DC too. But when I graduated, I graduated with like all honors and like 2 highly competitive scholarships, and then I tried to get a job in DC, and it was like all the entry-level jobs are filled with unpaid student interns. And then if you actually need to pay your rent, which was something I never worried about when I was in college, because it was like, oh, my parents are paying for my college. It was like, the only place I can work at is a bar, and the rent here is like $700 a month to split a studio with someone. Like, so for you, do you think that like it's necessary to have a graduate level degree to get a job in DC, or what? I just want to hear your thoughts on that.
I think we're both making the same face because basically, yeah.
It's possible, but it's highly unlikely. I think because when I came back from Korea in 2012, I really wanted to get a job in New York City. I'm sorry, in DC, but I couldn't find anything because I didn't have that. I didn't want to take an unpaid internship like you had mentioned, and then I didn't want to go to grad school right away, and it just was very difficult to start out right away without having that unpaid internship to lead into something. So I decided I would pursue something else, and I came back. But it is tough, and I think grad degrees make a very big difference.
So the problem is that I mean DC is like highly overeducated as far as a population within the U.S. Like it's per capita like the most graduate degrees by far in terms of like the U.S. And the reason for that is because a lot of people want the jobs that are here, and so unfortunately that has kind of inflated the level. Like the jobs that you're looking at for entry level, those are still like more or less entry level jobs, but they have now become grad degree required because that's the people who are applying to it. So it's kind of ridiculous. Like I have a friend who did MSFS with me, so she has a Georgetown graduate degree, and she works as like a very, very low entry level position on the Hill and makes like $35,000 a year. It's like horrible. So in DC, where you're right, like 700 is actually quite cheap for rent here. So yeah, it's the kind of thing where you either have to basically bite the bullet and do at least one unpaid internship that you think will lead into something, which is not ideal. It's really not, but that's what most people do, and therefore it's kind of become like a baseline requirement. Or if you go to grad school either here or in New York or somewhere where you can do unpaid or even paid internships during your graduate degree, then that saves you kind of that time of doing only an unpaid internship. Or like really network hard. So there are jobs that you can find, but you need someone to vouch for you because otherwise why would they hire you over someone with a master's degree who's probably also applied for that job?
Mhm.
So there's ways to do it, but it is very difficult if you don't have that like baseline master's degree, and it sucks. It's ridiculous, but I think that's just the way it is right now.
Yeah, and informational interviews are super helpful.
Mm-hmm.
So when I said I had tried to get a job here in DC, couldn't find one. I would say about a quarter of the people that I went on informational interviews with who worked in Korea policy, I still keep in touch with. I sat on a panel with one on Friday, actually. So even though it may not work out like in the immediate future, as long as you like persevere and try and whatever field you want to go into, it'll come back, and those connections will help you. And they'll remember that you were trying to find a job, and it'll be useful for you later on in your career if you come back to it.
And I would say too, like you guys already have a network. As we mentioned, like you have the Fulbright Korea alum network. I mean, and this is already like a good start. So, for example, if one of you comes back in September and you're looking for informational interviews or whatever, like email us. We know people. We know people who know people. Like just don't be embarrassed or like don't be worried about reaching out to the Fulbright Korea Alumni Network. And like the website has all these people who are in different places. You can like actually look it up. So if you're interested in something that someone is doing, or you're interested in like a company that you see someone is at, or you're just interested in like getting a job in DC and you're not sure where to start, like just email someone and be like, I'm a Fulbright Korea alum too. Can you meet for coffee or talk on the phone or something like that? And you would be surprised at like how easy it is for people to agree to that. Like it sounds like a big ask, but it's really not. Like people are totally willing to do that.
Awesome. I think we have time for one more question. I have one unless anybody else has a burning question.
I have a slightly off top. Well, not. It's very off topic, but it's about the newsletter for the Fulbright alumni newsletter. I was wondering if either of you have received it.
Yeah, I get them.
Okay.
Do you get it? Do you pay attention?
I don't know if I. Do you send it to?
I'm not trying to put you on the spot, but I guess this is to Jenna. But how do you keep a newsletter from going into the social tab on Google Mail? Because
That's hard. Yeah,
yeah.
that's so annoying. Because it does go into that's where it goes for me.
Okay.
But I just like check every once in a while, like in there, is there anything I actually care about? So I'm pretty sure that it has to be from the user end. So, for example, if I want that to not go into my social folder anymore, you can like do it as the user. But I don't think there's a way on your end to make it not do that.
I can't pray.
That's a good question. Actually, something that I should look into too, because I think ours have started going into there for Gmail as well.
Okay.
It's really annoying. If I figure it out, I'll let you know. If you figure it out, let me know too. But I think there's a way from like the user end. So if hypothetically you could send an email and be like, can everyone like add this person to your list of contacts, and then hypothetically it will go into the inbox instead.
Okay, really quick, last thread that we haven't pulled on. We have, I think all of us, perhaps one of us is staying. We have about 5 weeks, or fewer actually, left in Korea. What would the advice be that you would give, people in our position to soak up Korea, or like what was one of your, favorite last hurrahs here? What do you miss? What should we do before we head home?
I have a really good story. Sorry. So basically, I think it was about the place where you guys are at right now, maybe a couple of weeks, like 3 weeks left. And me and my closest friend in the province, we were talking, we were like, okay, like we have 1 weekend where we don't have to be like at final dinner or whatever left. What should we do? And we literally were like, okay, let's do something we have never done in Korea yet. And we're like looking on Korea Travel, KTO website, trying to find something really obscure. And it was like, okay, we want to do something outside. We want to do something where there's good photos, and we want to do something that we haven't done at all. And so, like, based on those, we went to this island off of Chungcheongnam-do coast that, like, it was this tiny little island. There was no hotels on the island, which we did not realize beforehand. There's 2 ferries a day, one in the morning and one at night. And we went there and ended up staying in like this Ajuma's house that she was kind of renting out the back room, and it was and hiking. There was like this really beautiful hike, and we were in the middle of nowhere, and it was amazing. Like, it was awesome. The coolest thing that I think I did while there, because no one has, like, I swear no one has ever seen a foreigner on that island. Because no one would ever need to go all the way out there. So anyway, but that was really cool. And you know, if you go with someone or like a couple people who like you're really close with, you can turn that ridiculous like where are we gonna stay tonight experience into like a really cool memory. So I would say like get out of the box, find something ridiculous, and you'll have a really great memory out of it.
Yeah. So yeah, I would recommend soaking up the time there. The time you have left. I haven't been back to Korea since I left in 2012, and I really want to go back, but it's, I don't know when the next opportunity to go back will be for you all either. Yeah, do have fun, enjoy yourselves. If you want to do some job search too, that's fine.
No.
But the key priority.
Yeah, get Korea.
The key priority is enjoying Korea, because it's a wonderful experience, and for all of us, and I don't think we'll probably ever have something like this ever again. And just enjoy what time you have left.
Awesome. Well, I think I speak for everyone. When you guys, I don't know, you guys are very excellent. Excuse me, like the best panelists we've had. This is so fun. Join me in thanking them, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Cool.
If you guys have follow-up questions, please feel free to email us. You have our emails now, or at least Robert does. So please email us if you need anything.
And if you're interested in anything that we do, please subscribe to our podcast that Jenna runs, and our blog, and our not our newsletter, our
mailing list. If you're going to
list.
be in DC, we have programs all the time with free food. So
Yeah,
income.
and all of our programs are on YouTube, and yeah.
Yeah. Hope you guys have a great last final month.
Word.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
I'm gonna go ahead. Cheers. Have a good day.
Yo, Vic, what's up?
What's up?
I'm still